Thank you all for being here.
Yep, I just wanted to make sure we got this recorded since those of our who wanted to be here might not be able to be here. So thank you for joining us for this month's Grit workshop where we have Amy Lemire, who's going to be talking on her sales strategies. And I'm really excited to go over her entire agenda. And I'll just have everybody enter in as they can, and you should have access to the shared screen as well. So I'll just go ahead and let you kick it off. If you guys want to turn your cameras on so we can see you, that's great. If not, you do not have to have the cameras on, but this will be recorded.
All right, awesome. Okay, let me see before we start. Okay, can everybody see my slide?
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you. Is it showing like all the slides or just one slide?
It's showing all the slides.
Okay, let me repurpose that for a second. Okay, great. All right. Well, welcome, ladies, and thank you so much for being here with me today. Thank you all that have given their introductions. Great to get to know all of you. And most importantly, I want to thank Jennifer for this opportunity and inviting me to speak today. Just to, couple comments. I have a very special place in my heart for women. I'm going to share a little bit about my story as we go through this workshop today. But, one of the biggest things I'll say is that women, we have a sense of service, compassion, and sometimes I don't think we are given the same equality in corporate America as we want to. So one of my biggest missions is always helping where I can. And I have found that some of the best leaders I've worked for are women. Some of the best people in sales, hands down. I was looking for a picture today because there was one year in my sales career where the top 10 was all women. I couldn't find it because I was going to share it. I thought that really spoke to the Grit community, but we do love our men counterparts as well. But just again, I just want to reiterate that I think this is a great tribe and I'm really honored and excited to be a part of it. So again, welcome and thank you for being here. It's no secret that there are a million other places that we all could be right now. We could be calling on clients, we could be on our email, we could be at meetings, we could be at social media, but you've all taken the investment to be here today. And I want you to know I honor that because that's a decision that I made early in my life, was to always be a student of being the best version of myself, being a student in sales, aligning myself with mentors. I'll be talking about that. And all of this is a journey. It's definitely not a destination. So thank you again for making the time. The big question I like to ask first is, who wants to sell more this year? Yay. I know all the other people that I don't see you. I'm sure you're raising your hands. And if you're not raising your hand, and then maybe that means your numbers and you could help me teach today. But every time I say that, people's hands go up fast. So the first thing that I typically do in these workshops is I do introductions. So I am going to go ahead and see if there's anyone else that's joined. It looks like we have, and the introduction question I'll ask you is your name. Of course, I can see that in the chat, but if there's a company you work for, if you have a sales role or a leadership role, and then what's your biggest challenge when it comes to selling? So would someone like to start? I could call people out, but I won't do that. I'll ask if somebody would like to just share that first.
I'll share, just because I'm about to get in my car. I'm Karen Maurer. Welcome and nice to meet everybody. I am a senior wealth manager and a partner at Trilogy. I have had my own financial advising practice for 25 years, and I am always interested in learning more about growth and the sales process because I think through the past 25 years, it's changed, and your resources for clients and how we serve them and take care of them is different than it used to be. So I'm excited to be on the call and learn. Thank you.
Thank you for joining, Karen. And we got to talk earlier and also got to see you last Friday at the Crisis Nursery event over the top. It was so fun. Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm putting the questions in the chat too for anyone that's joining. And again, just super quick introductions. Alexia, how about you?
Hi, Alexia Keel. I work for Correct Capital Wealth Management. I do specifically 401k plans, retirement plans for corporations. It's all I've done for 25 years, but I've always been on the service side, and I'm slowly moving into a business development role. So I mean, it's scary. Rejection, getting in front of people, making the time and still being a mom, is, going to be, that's probably going to be my biggest challenge. And I'm also introverted, very introverted, believe it or not. And, I, it's hard sometimes to pull myself out of my shell. So, I'm excited to be here.
Great, thank you. And I know we have met at some of the GRIT events. It's great to hear you again today. Thank you for joining.
Oh, I love you. You're awesome. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Oh my gosh, you made my day. Okay, and Denise, I know you introduced yourself earlier before actually, I'm sorry, I'm just going through the list here. Denise, we'll go to you and then we'll go to Sherry. I'm assuming it's Sherry, but Denise, would you like to introduce yourself again? Just anything you'd like to share as far as name, company, where, and what do you want to improve in sales?
Yes. So I'm Denise Edwards, and I'm an associate accountant at the G.R.I.T CFO. So not in a senior role, not in a sales role, but definitely here to learn. Because eventually in my career, I hope to be in one of those places. So definitely here to learn from all of you and see what you guys have to offer. I'm really excited for the workshop here today.
Okay, great. And thank you so much for joining. And thanks for also talking a little bit earlier as we were getting started. Appreciate your introduction. Okay, it looks like, is it Sherry? I want to make sure I'm saying that right. Okay, thank you, Sherry. Would you like to share anything about yourself, company? Where do you want to improve in sales? And I know everybody here's great in sales already, but I'll share today where I always want to get better as well, because it's a journey, right? It's not a destination. So, hello.
Sure. So my name is Cherry, like the fruit. That's
Okay.
okay. People call me Sherry. I take both. So I'm a financial advisor. I work for Correct Capital Wealth Management, a same company as Alexia. It's a great company, great team to work with. So I am really not trying to sell anything because if I try, I would be a terrible salesperson. However, I'm a great problem solver. All I'm trying to do to identify the pain points of people that where I can provide solution and to help them. So that's where I am. Obviously, it's great to learn the sales skills on the side. I just think I am looking for how can I come across the message to help people to identify their problem and issues, and then to convince them, hey, I have solution, I can help them. So uh, this is where I'm at. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for joining us. And I love what you said about providing solutions, finding problems. That's such an important part of sales that we'll definitely be talking about today. So, just a quick overview on what we're going to talk about today is this really, bullet pointed agenda. And just to preface this by saying, I typically, when I go into companies and when I used to work as a corporate sales trainer, we would do like 40-hour plus week sales trainings. And so I'm taking not 40 hours, but really what I believe continue to be the areas that we're always looking to get better, where I hear the most conversation about when it comes to sales effectiveness. So what I did is I broke that into a couple areas. Number one, in a moment, I'm going to be asking this question, and it is this one, the poll. And if you even want to start putting this in the chat right now, when you hear the word sales, what is your definition of sales? Or does it make you feel a certain way? Does it make you feel positive? Does it make you feel stressed out? Does the word sales seem complicated? Does it seem like a lot of fun? But if you want to start sharing that in the chat, that would be wonderful. I'm also going to talk about some of the biggest myths and mistakes we make in sales. And I'm going to share that a lot of this is from my personal experience, whether I was in frontline selling or the trainer and going out in the field with people that were selling. I don't want to stand here today and say that I've got it all figured out and that I'm perfect at sales, but what I'm just going to share is lessons learned. And today is going to be a conversational workshop. So I'll be asking questions. I'll be asking you to share in the chat, or if you want to raise your hand and share. I definitely don't want to be the only one talking today. Okay, and then I'm also going to share with you my zero to sales hero story. So what happened in my career when I figured out I was doing everything wrong, and how did I get myself back on track, and how did that take me to a new level, is looking into a new pathway of being more of a mentor versus the frontline seller. I'll also talk about some of the mindset habits around selling, because one of my personal philosophies is mindset is everything. And I'll share why. I think, again, I'm not knocking sales organizations, but most of the ones I worked for mostly focused on action and tactics. They did not focus on the mindset of self-discipline, self-confidence, following a process and a strategy. It was mostly get out there and just do more. So I found that with that piece missing, it's really tough to be effective in sales without the mindset side of it. And so I'll talk about how I always worked on my mindset when I was in sales, and I still do that today, as a matter of fact. I'll share with you a 5-step sales process that you can apply to your business, knowing that we're all different. We're in different businesses. I want to say it's not going to be a one size fits all, but it's going to be kind of just a general framework for a sales process. I'll talk about the most common objections and how I deal with them and what do I say. And then last but not least, I'm just going to circle it with comes first, all full circle. Really, what are some of the biggest lessons I've learned personally on this journey? So with that being said, I will go to this next question, and that is this one. Sales is blank. So if you feel like you want to raise your hand and say it out loud, you can. This can be popcorn shares. You don't have to raise your hand. If you want to put in the chat, that's fine also. But I would just love to get some idea of what is your definition of sales? What do you think sales is? And I'm going to pause while we do that. Service, love that. From Jennifer. Business development, absolutely. Is sales fun? Is it difficult? Is it complicated? Is it something that you enjoy? So again, what is sales to you? Can be very rewarding, absolutely. Yes, agree. Tough sometimes pushes me out of my comfort zone, being direct. Yes, get into the point. Sales is convincing people something is of value to someone. Multidimensional. Oh, I agree with that. 100%. Okay. And if more of these come to your mind, feel free to keep sharing. And what I'm going to do next is say I agree with every one of the comments that you put in the chat. And I'm also going to share with you what my definition of sales is. My personal definition of sales is all about finding out what someone or a company wants and needs and helping them get it. Okay, so my personal definition is sales is all about finding out what someone wants and needs and then helping them get it. So to me, I like that statement because it's neutral. It doesn't bring in rejection or being salesy into the conversation. It's more about helping and serving, which I've already seen that's come up a couple times from some of you. It's really all about service, in my opinion. So as we build that out just a little bit, as I said, and again, it's already come up here, but sales is service. So one of the things that I find very interesting about sales from my career is that there's really like 3 stages of selling, and they all have to do with service, right? We serve before the sale. So some of an example, I didn't really introduce myself, but I'll just share that, what do I tell people I do? I work with leaders and teams who want to be more, make more, and sell more with confidence and momentum by aligning sales and success habits that are simple. So what I find is that when I meet with companies that want to look at sales training or success habits training or individuals, we have conversations, it might be, and we're going to get into this later, but it's about, you might have that appointment, you might be doing some discovery. They might decide we want to bring somebody else into this conversation. We want to get a proposal from you. And then they've got some objections. And then finally we get to the golden place where we make the sale. But if you think about it, the making the sale is like the easiest part. It's the shortest part though. It's when we give somebody I call it a letter of commitment. I never say contract ever. Because that word contract sometimes sets off anxiety for people. What am I getting myself into? Oh my gosh, am I going to get locked into this? So I always say a letter of agreement or a letter of commitment. And I go, you might work for companies where that's not allowed, but if you can do that, I recommend it. But they're signing that agreement and they're maybe giving a purchase order or some money to you. That's like this much of the process. And then the biggest part, I believe, is that service after the sale. So one of the mantras that I really live by is having customers for life. When I was in medical sales, an example, I used to call on hospitals in Missouri and Illinois, and sometimes I go to a hospital and they'd say, we haven't seen a rep from your company in 3 years. They sold us this system and then they never showed up again. And I don't ever want to be that person. What I do with my current customers and the corporate side is I do quarterly business reviews. We're always having follow-up meetings, even ones that say, okay, we're finished with our agreement with you. I still check in with them, every 30 days. How are things going? Can I be of service to you in any way? But I stay in touch with those individuals. Another great way to stay in touch with your tribe is to have a newsletter, have a blog. I have a blog on LinkedIn called the Sales Confidence Code, and it's not salesy, it's just sales tips, and it's free, so people don't have to spend any money on it. But find ways that you can give back to your community. Webinars, lunch and learns, volunteering, networking. There's so many things we can do after we make a sale to continue to be out around those people in that community. I think that's the funnest part of sales myself, is when we get to that point, because there's a reason for this that I'll share with you next, is that as I mentioned, it's about service. It's not about power. And so sometimes I think we have this myth or belief that sales is all about really pushing someone or making them do something. And if you're thinking of it that way, definitely invite you to change your approach. I know no one on this call does that, but some examples that what we don't want to do, some of the examples that are fresh in my mind is I had the honor and the joy of going away on a cruise to, let's just say, the Mediterranean. And we stopped in one country. And as I got off the ship, I won't mention the name of the country. You can look at my Facebook page because I don't want to put anyone or anything down here. But I got off the ship with my friend, and all I heard was lady, 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 and they were like, and they even called us Barbie because I had my lipstick on, I had my hair done. And it was really, I felt I had every intention to buy a knockoff Louis Vuitton bag that day. I wanted a black one. I had my mind and heart set on it. And that sales experience and that feeling was like, I don't want to buy anything here. I want to go look at the shore and get back on the ship. So just remember that the sales experience, we're going to talk about this later, the way you show up, the way we treat people, and again, that's a pretty extreme example. But the other thing I ask you to reflect on is if you've ever bought a car before. Sometimes we go into car dealerships, and I'm not knocking anybody that's in car sales. I dated a car salesman for a while, and he was a great guy. So I'm not saying it like that. But, one of the things that we sometimes find is we go in there and it's like, one time I went into a dealership and the first thing the man said to me was, we have a no haggle pricing policy, which means the price you see on your car is what you're going to get. And I was like, I hadn't even really decided I was going to buy a car that day. I didn't really show the interest yet. There wasn't a need established. But then I went to another dealership and the guy said, hey, how are you? What do you do? What kind of work do you do? Do you want to go on a test drive? He asked more questions about me, and it seemed like he didn't care if he made that sale or not. I ended up buying that day with no intention to ever do that. So just remember that the way we show up is so important, and we're going to share data about that in a bit. And then remember, your current clients lead to referrals, repeat business, and references. And I should have added this, but I didn't. The R is relationships too, another one. So there's some more text at the bottom of this slide. I'm not going to read all of it. You can certainly see it. But just remember that sales is all of these things and more. So is there anything anybody wants to add about sales that I haven't said that you think it might be? I think it came up. I just saw sales is convincing people something is of value to someone. Love that. Okay, that was from before too. But if there's something I've missed, feel free to put that in the chat. Does this make sense to everybody so far? Yep. Okay, great. And then the next thing I want to share with you are some of the biggest myths about selling. How many of you think there might be some myths or mistakes in our mindset we make in sales? Has anyone ever done that besides me? It's, it's hard. It's all about rejection. Taking it personally when someone doesn't buy. Took me a while to get through that piece of it. And it's part of the growth process. So I want to share with you what some of these biggest myths are. And before I do that, I want to come back to that comment that I just made a few minutes ago, that there was a survey done and 200 buyers were interviewed, and they were asked, what is the most important factor in making a decision to buy from somebody else? Is it the price? Is it the client experience? Is it the product or service? Or is it the sales technique? And we can all see what the answers are, but I'm gonna just talk a minute on each one of these. So first of all, the price. Customers, they said in the survey, we are willing to spend more on somebody or something if they help me see the value in it. So it's up to us on this call and anyone listening to the replay, it's up to us to help them see the value behind what the price is. Have any of you ever bought something that you weren't planning to buy, or you spent more money on something that yeah, and most of the time it's going to be because of that second bubble. 70% of the reason someone buys from you or somebody else is that client experience. Probably one of the best examples I can share is I signed up with somebody recently to get my headshots redone. And I saw her yesterday and I said, "You are the best salesperson at this." And she goes, "What are you talking about?" But she had a really special way of making me feel comfortable. She had some questions she asked me. She wasn't pushy. She worked with my schedule. And she was very knowledgeable. And she just has, each time we meet, she sends out a summary. And so I feel like I really trust this person because I can tell that she has my best interests in mind. I can tell she's not about, "Hey, I just want your money and I want to get these pictures done." And I haven't, not knocking photographers, I haven't always had that same experience. So just remember that the client experience, some examples the survey said are you easy to work with? Are you easy to do business with? Do you help me avoid landmines? Are you knowledgeable on your industry? Are you able to customize your solutions for me? And sometimes I work with companies and I put a quote out that's like this, and they are like, what we really need right now is that. And I don't say, "Well, I'm not going to do it then." It's like, "Oh, okay, sure, I understand. Let's right size this for you." But another tip for negotiation, ladies, that I'll share with you is if you start too low, there's nowhere to go. Okay. So if you start too low, there is nowhere to go. Just a nugget here that's not even on the slide is I typically not trying to put too much on a proposal, but it's always easier to take things off than to be down here and the customer's ready to buy and you realize you're missing this and you're this and this, to have to go back to them and say, "Oh, hey, I need to add a lot more to the proposal now." So that's one of the just a sales practice that I typically try to follow. And you might be surprised. I put out proposals that were like that. And I was like, to my husband who helps me with my operations, I'm like, "There's no way they're going to buy this. Oh my gosh, this is expensive." And I've had customers say, "Okay, yeah, when can we get started?" So you just never know what they're going to say. But we're going to talk about discovery shortly, about why it's important to do that first before we put that proposal out there. Product and service. The clients that were interviewed said, and I hope there's no one in marketing on this call today, but they said, "We don't see as big of a difference between company A, company B, and company C. It comes down to that person that is across from us that makes the difference." So they also said that the third piece of it, sales technique, this is literally from the survey. They said there were some sales representatives or agents that I would spend my money to spend an hour with. And there were some of those that I felt like I was robbed of an hour of my life. So when I was in sales, I always used to ask myself each day, how am I going to be that person that person would pay an hour to have a conversation with? So industry insights, educating your clients, even when they're not buying, newsletters, blogs, again, some of the things I said before are really great ways to keep your clients engaged, or your prospects. Your prospects, that is so important too, to keep yourself out there. So I am going to pause there and just want to see, does anybody have any questions about this? Does this surprise you, or is this something that you think you already knew about?
I was surprised that the pricing was so low. I would have thought that would have been more at like the 50%. I'm not sure, but that was the only one that kind of struck me.
I forgot to mention that. Thank you, Jennifer, that when I first saw this research, and when I was also in sales still, I remember how many times I would go to my manager, my boss, and say, "If we could just take 10% off of this, I know they're going to buy." And I knew for me personally, it was like hope was my strategy. And I didn't really. So another tip, if you're going to give something, get something in return. So it's year end right now. I'm putting out some proposals, and some of them I might say, "I'll give you a 10% discount if you can sign my letter of commitment by December 1st. I don't just put a discount in there to put a discount in there. And sometimes I don't do that at all. It's got to be someone that I feel is highly qualified is going to buy before I'll do that. And I've got a couple right now that I'm not doing that because we're still kind of getting to know each other and don't know if we're going to be the right fit yet. But that's just another tip I wanted to pass along to you there too is always get something in return, and don't give without getting, because we teach our customers and prospects to keep asking for more if we keep giving them more without asking for something else. A great technique on this is also, yes, please jump in.
Oh, sorry. And I'm still driving, so I couldn't put the video on. But I always have, not always, but occasionally in the financial services industry, somebody will ask for a discount.
Mhm.
And we have breakpoints, of course, for the amount that we're managing. But when it comes to the negotiations, I kind of gently say, well, it wouldn't be fair for me to give you a discount and not the person that's coming in after you. And almost try to help them see that each client is just as important as the next one. And so in the industry of service, you know, I want them to know I give everybody the highest level of service I can, and that's worth X amount. And so kind of like you said, you know, if you want a discount, okay, but then your service is not going to be the same. And
Right.
that's not how I operate. I can't just give you half of myself. So I do think in some cases, you know, there isn't always a space to negotiate because you really aren't tailoring the experience. And and I mean, sometimes I get offended because I'm like, well, why do you think you're any better than the other person who's going to pay
Mhm.
this?
Right.
You have to word that gently.
Yeah, of course. No, and I appreciate so much what you just shared, Karen. And I call that concept, I think I heard it from another coach I've worked with, is pricing integrity. And pricing integrity just means that I'm going to offer the same rate to this person as that person. And there are some entities, i.e. the federal government, where, you know, when I used to sell to like the VA hospitals, they had a federal supply pricing schedule and we could never, ever deviate from that, you know, upcharge or go below what, you know, what the pricing was. So it's really, and some of the medical companies also call it the Sunshine Act, which means, you know, what you charge one customer, you have to charge another customer, and you can't, you know, give freebies and giveaways. Now, again, giving an incentive for a commitment by this date, but okay, that's different. But just saying we're going to throw in this or throw in that, it's really important. And I agree with you that in my experience, and we're going to talk about this in objections, sometimes when people just say, I don't have the time or the money, it's typically a smokescreen for something else. And I won't get into all that right now, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. So thank you for sharing. Is there anybody else that had any ahas from this data that wants to share? That's something that stood out?
Yes, just as someone on the service side of everything, I definitely agree with the client experience just because I know people have gone from sales to client services and maybe something was conveyed in sales that is not happening in client service. So I feel that um that's important throughout the whole entire relationship to keep that
Mhm.
momentum. If you had great momentum in sales and then the client experience isn't as great, I've seen people leave and even are willing to pay more, you know, for a better experience somewhere else.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And I know I've heard this, and one of the best ways, just to continue on to what Denise said, is one of the best ways you can find out about your competition is if you're working with a prospect or even a current client. I might say, what other training companies have you worked with or looked at? And and I won't mention their names, ABC company. And I'll say, what did you like about them the most? What did you not like the most about them? And it's interesting what you can find out. One of them told me, and again, I'm, you know, protecting the name of the company. I'm not here to knock my competition, but one of them said, you know, I heard this recently. They came in and they did this big training. They hadn't really done any discovery beforehand. And when they were done, they just left. And we feel like we spent a lot of money, didn't get what we wanted out of it. And the crazy thing is, I know the person in the company personally. So we're going to talk about the importance of following a sales process, because not only does it set you up for success, it helps guide your customer down a roadmap and a pathway so that they know what is coming. And you can also make sure you don't miss a step. Most of the times I've had sales failures have been when I skip one of these steps, or I try to wing it, or I miss one of the parts of it. And so I always like to bring that up. Okay, so it looks like Debbie joined. Hey, Debbie, welcome. See you there. Okay, so this next part of the discussion is really going to be around the
Hi,
whole.
just didn't
Hey, Debbie.
hit the unmute. Sorry.
No problem. Welcome. Glad you're here today. So what I want to talk about is really the myths about sales. And these are like some of one of, the reason I put power is I made an acronym with it, but I think sometimes when we follow these myths or we truly believe these myths, I think we give our power away. So the way we can take our power back is typically the opposite of what each of these is. So I'm going to take a moment and just explain what these are. Okay, so the first one is price. We just learned, some of us might think, and I've been guilty of this myself too, price is most important. But we just learned on that last slide that price is not the most important decision factor for somebody. It is client experience. Client experience leads. And I'm going to say up front, yeah, there's probably exceptions to that. But again, going back to this is a survey of 200 buyers that were buying complex products. Okay, so if you're going into the grocery store, it might be different, but we're talking about business to business type selling. Customers really care about the client experience first and foremost over everything. And the second myth that I always have come across is only some are good at sales. Has anyone else ever heard that before? Someone just says, I'm terrible at sales. I can never do that. I don't know how you do it. But I believe, and I'll share more of my story in a few minutes, I think sales is a skill every one of us can learn. And so the big takeaway for this that I'll talk about is the importance of getting mentors, coaches, go to workshops, go to seminars, become a student of the sales skills industry. When I first got started, again, most of the companies I worked for, it was always like, go get them, just do whatever it's going to take to get the sale. Some of them didn't even have training. And I remember reading Tom Hopkins books, Tony Robbins books, workshop seminars. I did a lot to get better because not knocking the companies I work for, but a lot of them didn't provide any of that. And that was not enough to succeed. So being a student is always a great idea. The next is, let me see here. Why isn't this building out? Okay. What I sell is more important than how I sell. So that's definitely a myth. We should think more about how we sell versus what we're selling. So when we talk about how we sell, we talked about the sales experience. Something I talk about often with teams is self versus other focus. I think one of the biggest mistakes we make in sales is we talk too much. Okay, so talk less, listen more, and be prepared. I think sales meetings and appointments should be like an interview. Come in with prepared questions, listen. The only time you should be doing most of the talking is like today, I'm giving a presentation. If I was given to a president, of course, I'm going to be doing most of the talking. But try to make it conversational. You might notice I check in every so often and ask you if there's comments or questions, because you want people to be engaged with you at the same time. Every interaction is like an interview. I just shared that, but ask more, talk less. And also another side of this too is even asking questions. When I go into sales meetings, I always ask, hey, do you still have 30 minutes? When I was in healthcare sales, sometimes the chief nurse officer would say, I just called into a meeting in 10 minutes. So I always ask, hey, is this still, is the timing still good? Finish your meetings early. If you still need more, I had a meeting a while back. There was a discovery meeting, 5 people, everybody was talking. It was great, but we were running up against the time that we had set. And I said, hey, I just noticed we're at the top of the hour. Do you all have 5 more minutes or 10 more minutes? And everybody said, yes, we do. But the last thing you want to do is go over that meeting time, because that sends people a message that their time might not be as valuable to them as it really is, to you as it really is. Remember ABC, always be closing. Has anybody heard that before besides me? Let's change that to always be connecting, because Always Be Connecting is about, connecting with people. When I teach my habits course, that is the first habit we talk about. And we base that course on the greatest salesman in the world, and that overrides everything that we do. So without a connection, we've heard that Zig Ziglar saying people buy from who they like and who they trust. It is so true. We've been talking about sales experience. So much of that is just trust. And really creating that rapport with somebody else is, I think, at the top of the list before anyone's going to want to do business with us, no matter what we're selling. So I'm going to pause there and ask, does anybody have any questions or comments on these takeaways? Is there anything I missed of just some of the myths and some of the mistakes we can make in selling?
I think you already addressed it, but I think one of the things that most sales professionals forget is it's not about them, and how to handle that rejection, because it's just going to happen over and over and over again. Not
Yes.
internalizing that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I could do a whole nother session on prospecting and business development, but just a couple quick tips that I'm glad you brought that up, Jennifer, is so my mom was also a sales trainer in the past, and one of the best exercises that I do in person, that I got from her, I'm giving her credit, is I get a bag of M&Ms and I give everybody some of those M&Ms, and then people will pull out the greens, the yellows, and the reds, and they push all the other colors aside. If you can start thinking of sales and business development like M&Ms, that your greens are yes, yellows are maybe not right now, and your red is no, and all those other colors are the MIAs, the people that you leave messages for, the people that said, I want to meet you, and they dodge you, the people that you have been trying to get a hold of time and time again. So the reason I think of M&Ms don't have feelings, they're numbers. And we're going to have some days, in the group, when we do this in person, some people have 10 greens and no reds and no yellows. Sometimes I have people that have all reds. There's just going to be days that are going to be like that. They're going to be weeks that are like that. And there's no need to take it personally. So I know that's probably one of the biggest challenges I know I had. And yes, is it still a letdown when you don't get absolutely it is. I won't make today about all of that, but I still have those times. I was really counting on that one, or it was going to be that one I was getting excited about. And then they're like, we're either not going to do this right now, or we're pushing it off. But one side of that too is if you're in complex sales, something I learned in my sales career is time kills all deals. So if you have those opportunities that are lingering and going out longer and longer, I hate to say this, I'm wearing red today, but it can be a red flag. So and we're going to talk about that in the sales process, ways to keep that going. So thank you, Jennifer. Anybody else have anything else they'd like to share?
Amy, I heard something one time that stuck with me from a mentor, and that's when I'm interacting with a client. Once I give my value proposition, if I'm talking, I'm selling. If they're talking, they're buying. And I thought that was really, really poignant that, listening to the customer and, yeah, not overselling.
Love that. So no one to the power, I don't have that on there, but I should, but the power of silence.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time. I mean, honestly, it probably took me the first 15 years of my sales career to figure out that if I just let them talk more, they'll typically sell them to themselves, sell the solution or product to themselves. So that's a great takeaway. Thank you for that, Lisa. Okay, anyone else before I move on? Talk a little bit about, okay. So I'm going to share here. Okay. So sorry, I'm freezing. Okay. So I want to share a little bit about my personal story. This is baby Amy from 2011. At this point in my life, I'm going to share a little bit about my personal story, because one thing I did not say yet is I did not wake up one day being great in sales. And I'm going to share how I went from my best year to my worst year. Some of you might have heard my story before, but I really, first of all, want to start off by saying that I mentioned this a couple of times, but the importance of having mentors and coaches. So this first person here, Laura, was my sales director back, I think she was my director from 2008 to like 2011 or 12. I probably learned more from her than any, just so much, but just to share, she was really good at carrying a velvet hammer. She's really good at keeping silence, and she was very, very amazing at critical thinking and strategy. So those were some of the things I learned from her. And I also learned from her the idea of we don't have to talk all the time. Again, presentation here, I am talking a lot, but especially in sales interactions, it's really important that we listen more. And then I had my best year ever that year. I don't have my plaque on this picture, but I actually got to go to the national sales meeting and I was a top performer. I got the Sales Excellence Award. I got to get on stage for the first time after being at this company for 5 years. And the last picture was, this is the Vice President of Sales, Rick. And then Andy is one of my, to this day, probably with Laura, one of my best sales mentors. We're still friends today. But when I went into the sales training side, I actually followed him to a few companies. But one of the things that I think I appreciated about him is that he was always about, you have what it takes to succeed, just get out there and do it. And the importance of positive self-talk. He was always very inspiring and motivating. And then Rick was a little bit different. Rick was from like the south side of Chicago. So he was just kind of like find a way, make a way kind of guy. So he was always about don't let excuses and your mindset get in the way. Just get out there and do whatever it takes. And he kind of had that mental toughness side of him as well. But back to my story. So this was a really great time in my life. I felt like things couldn't get any better. I was on stage at this national sales meeting. I got promoted to be a sales field trainer. And then came the next year. So the next year started out like this. I don't know how it started, but I remember I went from being at the top to starting the next year, and things started out really slow. I remember through the company I worked for, everybody was supposed to be on target with their sales quarter by quarter, or it wasn't good. And I remember halfway through the first part of the year, I was like barely at like 5 to 7% of my quota. And so my boss started saying, what's going on? And I was like, well, it's a customer, this is my territory, it's our pricing. I had all these reasons of why I couldn't sell and what was not working out. And then came the morning she sent this email. I opened up my laptop before my calls, and she sent the PIP. And for those of you that don't know what that means, the performance improvement plan. Basically, if you don't turn around your performance in the next 90 days, you're going to be fired. I mean, at first I was like, fired? I was angry. I was like, hey, I've been here, how many years now? I had the best year ever. I mean, what is this all about? And I was really upset. But as the day went on, that anger turned into like shock. It was like, oh my gosh. I mean, what if I get fired? What am I going to tell my customers? What am I going to tell my family, my friends? I mean, my whole identity was being the sales rock star at that point in my life. So that night I made a decision. I came home from my calls and I looked into the distance and I was like, maybe I can try to turn this thing around, or maybe I should quit. And I'm like, well, if I quit, no one's going to hire me at this percent of a quota. And for anyone that's not been in the medical sales or pharmaceutical, it's a really competitive industry. It's really hard to get into these companies. So I knew I couldn't quit, and I thought I'm going to try to turn this around. So I hired a sales coach. To this day, I get chills every time I say that. It was one of the best professional decisions I've made in my life. And my coach, Mike, worked with me over 90 days. And he got me to see some of the biggest mistakes I was making. And I'm going to share what those are. The first thing he got me to see is I had lost my confidence. Confidence is waking up every day saying, what if I don't make it? What if I get fired? What if I fail? But then one day I remember waking up and I was like, I'm not going out this way. I mean, I've worked too hard in my career to just flush it down the toilet. So the second I shifted my self-confidence, everything started changing. The next thing that I forgot was connection. I was so focused on just making a number. I wasn't focusing on servicing my clients, building new relationships, maintaining the existing ones. And one quick story is, I remember I lived outside Chicago, but I went to I had a customer in Rockford, Illinois. And did any of you have those tough customers that you have a hard time with, or they're just not always nice, right? But you got to work with them. His name was John, and I was in the hospital cafeteria drinking a Diet Coke. he happened to walk in and I just decided to have a conversation. Hey, how are you, John? What's new? And I just came from a connection standpoint. And then within 5 minutes, he said, hey, I've got a purchase order down in my office for you for $750,000. It was an add-on order to the fleet of infusion pumps that I was selling. And, you know, true story, but it got me to finally kind of see that just taking the time to connect and have conversations and get to know people and not thinking about the sale all the time is so important. And the next one is, sorry, I built these both out. Okay, structure. We'll talk in a couple minutes just about having a sales process, but it's also self-discipline. I had gotten lazy. I was not making my prospecting calls. I believe I have a rule called the 3-3-3-1 rule that 30% of our time on a weekly basis should be spent on business development. That can be networking. It can be making new contacts. It could be, you know, if you reach out to everybody on this call today and just say, hey, Susie, it was great to see you on the call. It'd be great to connect on LinkedIn. Not selling anything. But I do that all the time when I go to these networking meetings. That's also business development because they might not be somebody that's going to ever buy from you, but they might know someone else, or you might, I've had people call me years later and say, hey, I met you and I know somebody or I need something. And then also following the sales process, we'll talk about finding your personal why. Why are you doing the business you're doing? I know for most of us, it probably is because I like to work with people. We might have a personal story. But does anybody want to share why you're doing the business you're doing? Because on the toughest days, and I have those, we all have them, sometimes remind yourself why you got into this. But would anybody like to share why you're doing the business you're doing? Jennifer, I'm looking at you. I know you've got a huge mission.
Well, yeah, I love to champion women and help them step outside of their comfort zone and support them in that journey, as well as helping them be empowered by finding like-minded individuals. So I was definitely called to this work, and I constantly I'm trying to build on trying to find more ways that I can add more value to the women that I serve. So
Love that. Thank you so much, Karen. And then I think Debbie also came up.
Yeah, I would say this is all I've ever done. So it definitely is, my zone of excellence, if you will. And I love doing this where you're stepping out into your, zone of genius and trying new things. But I love when a client leaves and they say, thank you so much. We feel so much better leaving than we felt when we came in. Being part of that transformative process to ease their minds and bring calm and clarity to their financial situation and their future is just so rewarding. It's addictive. I mean, really, that feeling is just such a high and such a privilege to be able to work with people and provide them with that feeling. So I just can't help but continue to be motivated for it.
Love that. Thank you so much. I love that feeling. It's like crossing a finish line and but it's a long finish. It's a finish line after that too. So agree 100%. Debbie, how about you? Anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, I started my company during the pandemic because I saw how business owners were suffering and how they didn't understand finance. And that was, I looked back at my grandfather and, when he retired, we thought he was going to be well off. He owned a cottage. He owned his own shop. He owned his home. What we didn't know is he really filed a tax return, did not understand how retirement had worked, and never saved a dime. He thought he was going to be dead at 65. He retired at 62. And if you don't know, your Social Security is based on the earnings you report. So when you don't report earnings, guess what happens? Lowest amount possible. So, he had set himself up to live at the poverty level and lost everything he'd worked for his whole life. And I thought he was an anomaly. And then when the pandemic happened, so many people didn't understand finance. That's the heart of what we do, because we want to make sure that business owners and the employees they support are successful.
Wow, thank you. That's such a valuable story for all of us to hear. I appreciate that very much. I didn't realize you started your business during the pandemic either. That's awesome.
I did. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you, ladies. Anyone else want to share what your why is? We move on. Okay. And you can put it in the chat if it comes to you later. The other quick takeaways that I want to share that I put this in my book From Zero to Sales Hero, but the three other, I always talk about the AAA formula that even if you're super successful in sales or if you're trying to figure it out, no matter where you are, when I am not making my numbers, I look at these three areas every time I'm in that like slump, right? So how's my attitude? Am I focused on positivity? Am I getting coaching? Am I getting support? Am I getting help? There's a lot of ways we can bring our attitudes back up. Reading, meditation, having a morning ritual, walking, there's, spending time with your children. But, one of the ways I keep my attitude positive too is when I'm driving between meetings, a lot of times I just turn the music off in my car and it really just recharges my brain a little bit from what's going on during the day. It's a great way to be with yourself instead of just that, we all have a lot of noise in our mind. I'll speak for myself. Accountability. I define accountability as what we're doing when nobody else is watching. So I learned that year, as I mentioned, I wasn't prospecting anymore. I was just thinking that I did great last year. It's just going to magically carry to this year. And I have not been in a business where things just magically carry over. I wish that was the case. And if I knew how to do that, I'd tell you all, but it does take activity, which is the next element. Activity equals results. My first outside sales job was with a payroll services company in St. Louis way back in 1996. And they told us every day, stop focusing on the numbers, focus on your daily activity. And I still believe that to this day, that activity is everything. It really is. Sales is not a spectator sport. And activity can be fun things like networking, like coming to a meeting like this. It can be, there's so many things you can do that are not, old school, just picking the phone up all the time. But one of the ways I do my activity is I'm reaching out to all the people that went to my sales trainings over the year, managers, people, and just, hey, how are you? We haven't talked in a while. What's been going on? Never start that conversation off with, hey, I want to talk to you about my new business or my new products. I always start with, how are you? It'd be great to get to know more about you. Maybe we could meet for virtual coffee. Make it about them, because if you're not starting off that conversation, getting to know them more, that's when we can show up salesy, in my humble opinion and in my experience. And I know I've been guilty of that in the past. Okay. So, let's see here. Okay. And so one of the biggest takeaways from my story, I want to remind all of you, is the learning is in the valleys. I was telling Jennifer before we got started today, a really great book I recommend for any of you that are entrepreneurs is called The Gap and the Gain by Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy. And sometimes as entrepreneurs, I think we think that the great things are at the top and the peaks of the valley, and they are, but we learn more in the valleys. So really learn to appreciate the down times, because the down times are when we pivot, when we find a new way, when we make a way, and we get lifelong lessons, whether it's business, relationships, other setbacks or challenges, finances. We learn in these times. And I think sometimes we think that we're bad people or we're failures if we have these valleys. I've had a ton of valleys. I mean, some of you have heard all my, my life stories and talks, but that's where I've gotten better. And so make it a habit to find the good in these times. What am I learning? How's this making me a better person? How can I teach this to somebody else? So that's something I also practice in my life. And speaking of that, one of the free bonuses I want to give all of you is, if you are curious about where your thought habits are, if you remember my story earlier, I believe there's two games in success. There's an inner game of mindset and thought habits, which I think drives everything we do. And then there's the outer action game. And what I came to find from, again, my career, reading, being a student, constantly focusing on my mindset every day. Some days are better than others. We're going to wake up some days and not want to do anything. I mean, it's getting to be colder outside. But we can always choose to have positive thought habits. And if you take this assessment, it takes about 7 minutes. It's free. And then for anybody that's on this call today that takes it, I will also offer you a complimentary 15-minute review of your report. Your report is confidential. Our conversation is confidential. But this is a tool that I work with other entrepreneurs and teams on. All right.
And something I can't remember, Amy, because I know I took this like oh my gosh, during COVID in 2021. Did those change, those habits change? So if I were to retake this, would that be a different habit?
Yes.
Okay,
Okay, that's
that's
a
what I
great
couldn't remember.
question. It's a great question. The habits do change, and there's depending on what your life situations are, your experiences that are happening at the time you take it, it does change over time. And one of the cool things about this is our brain has a quality called neuroplasticity, which means we can change our thought habits. I'll be upfront, I struggle with procrastination, but I know how to ask myself, I'm going to feel a lot better if I do this today than the stress I'm going to feel next week if I don't get this done. So what this also helps you do is ask yourself better questions and get yourselves out of the stuckness that we feel sometimes from day to day. Because the coolest thing too is when I work with individuals, if, you know, again, I'm not making a sales pitch for this program, but we also have them retake the assessment at the end of that time. And we do significantly see sometimes 30 to 60 to 70% score increases because we've taught you some new tactics of how to deal with the resistance, and I always call it the noise in our minds. So does that answer your question, Jennifer? Okay, awesome. Thank you. All right. So then getting close to the end here, I just wanted to also take a moment and talk about sales process. Again, your company might have one. This is not really one size fits all. I would just say this is probably a business to business type sales scenario. If I'm working with an individual on coaching or something, my process is a little different. So the first thing I want to remind you all is discovery and pre-call planning is the most important part of that process. Looking at someone's LinkedIn profile, you know, if it's a company, maybe you're looking at the website, what products do they sell, service mission. And then what I do is when I do these meetings, I have a 50 question questionnaire. Okay, now I don't ask 50 questions, but I schedule 45 minutes. What are your biggest problems right now you're facing? Tell me about your sales results. What's your team like? Just those types of questions that I focus on. The next most important part is after I've gotten that meeting done, I schedule a follow-up meeting, and that's when I put together an executive summary. I bullet point out what that person has told me in 4 key areas, and then I do a SWOT. Here's what I see your biggest strengths are, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. And I remind them it's confidential because we're really putting their stuff on a piece of paper. And then at the end of that document, I make recommendations. Here's what I recommend. And I recommend you implement a program that will bring you a sales process that's repeatable, that we work on your success habits, that we also have some in classroom training on everything. And that I also come and do aftercare, which is ongoing coaching, virtual webinar refreshers once a month. So I kind of lay all that out. And then they can say, that looks great, or that's more than we need. Great. And then the next thing I do at the end of that is the next step is a proposal kind of between agreement recommendations. Letter of commitment is the proposal and handle the objections. And then the last thing is the letter of commitment before we go. The letter of commitment is the agreement or contract. And as I said, I really try to stay away from that word contract because I always feel like it kind of sends off the bells and whistles. And then the last thing I do is I have a focus on a shared commitment or partnership. It's got to be a win-win for both of us. If I experience in the beginning of the sales process, we're not going to be a good fit for each other. If I'm not talking to the right people, I'm going to probably not get to that end process of the process. So it's really important if we do have a partnership that it's a win-win. I'm not coming in way too low on my price. They're not regretful that, oh my gosh, we're spending way too much on this. We really want to make sure we're in alignment because that's what's going to build that long-term relationship. So any questions on this one? Nope. Okay. Oh, Debbie, I think you're on mute.
I think you're right on because the whole sales process is building trust, right? And people buy on emotion and trust. So if you have a good, those questions you talk about asking, like having your questions that distinguish you from other parties and getting them to talk, because that's what those questions are about, right, Amy? We're getting them
Oh,
to
yeah.
talk about what their concerns and things are. I think it's brilliant. I've been dying to hear you talk on this. I'm sorry I missed the first part. So
No worries. I
It's
think Jen,
recorded.
recording. Yeah, she's recording it. So again, anyone else that could make it. No, I appreciate this. And this is probably, I gave this same talk similar at the Small Business Expo, and a couple people came up to me afterwards and said, the way you're doing it is different than what I've been taught. And most of this I'm showing you right now is from my career in medical sales when we were dealing with C-suite executives, sales opportunity anywhere from 100,000 to $19 million. So we were held accountable as a team to each one of these steps. And we were drilled on where we were. The biggest three elements of a successful close, I don't have it in the slide, are finding a customer's why now, what's their burning reason. Example, I had a customer yesterday that said, we've lost 5 or 6 RFPs worth about $10 million lately. We need to do something different. Executive sponsor. Am I talking to somebody that has a decision-making authority, access to funding, and that owns the business problem? Sometimes we make the mistake, I've done this, that we deal with somebody who's down here, not that they're bad people, but they don't have that authority. So maybe they could introduce us to somebody up here. And then the last is the buying process. Finding out in the beginning the who, what, when, where, why, how, who's going to be involved. Do you have a timeline? Do you have a budget? Is there anything else that I should know about when you look at making purchases like this before we get started? So really making sure that you are, and then I might even tell them about the process I'm going to do with them so they know what's coming. And if they don't like it, I've never had anybody say I don't like it, but so they know what's coming, and we're setting the right expectations up front. So thank you for sharing that, Debbie. Any other comments?
Yeah, I'm sitting here and I do my to-do list and sales is on my to-do list. And I just realized from your talk, it needs to be a whole separate thing. It should not be on my to-do list. It needs to be a separate thing that I pay attention to every single day. And so thank you for reminding me, Amy.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you. And I learned from that year that I almost got fired. That to this day, 2011, I still remember that. And when my numbers are down, I'm honest, am I really doing the business development? I try to do 50 outreaches a week, by the way, whether it's current clients, networking, it doesn't mean picking up 50 phone calls and calling people, but it can be a lot of different touches. So I invite you all, if you're not having some kind of a KPI weekly system, how many contacts do you want to make? Do you have a revenue goal? Are you trying to schedule a certain amount of discovery calls? Things like that. I look at that on a daily basis, even today. And I started that during that year I almost got fired. My coach helped me see that I needed to start setting up KPIs. Okay, do you
When I
ladies
first
have a few
started
more?
my business, that was the first
Yeah.
thing I did every morning, and then you get busy.
Yeah.
And so now I'm like, I have to get back to the old habits that worked. First thing I do every morning.
Love that. Thank you. Yeah, it is. I appreciate you sharing that. And because that was something that I know it's pivotal even today in my business to do that. And it gives you confidence to do that, by the way. There are rewards, ladies, for doing these things. You will feel better about yourself, even if you don't have a great week, you tried. I used to sit at McDonald's, even if I was in Central Illinois on a Friday afternoon, and my coach had me send this to him every Friday. So if the numbers weren't there, it didn't matter. I had to send it to him. So, but it kind of helped me build that habit to send it to somebody else. So that's another idea, is think about sending it to someone else.
You can send it to me. I'm your grit lady. I can
Yeah.
do that. Send it to me.
Awesome. Sounds great. So, this has been a great discussion. We're getting close to the end. I know we're running up against the clock. Does everybody have about 5 more minutes-ish? Okay, cool. Thank you. So I want to talk about objections for a minute. Objections are questions in disguise. And I remember, early in my career, and it still happens today, you get the objection and you're like, oh no, now what do I do? So a couple tips on handling objections I want to share with you. Number one is pause. Do not immediately respond to somebody. I made this mistake a while back. Not to get too far into it, but they were going to sign up for my workshop. And she said, I thought it was free, because we're doing work with you already. And I quickly said, oh yeah, it's free. And then I looked back on that. I'm like, that was so stupid. I need to own my boundaries about this. Was not in your original agreement. We didn't agree to it. But I find sometimes just to take a step back and really think about it and let your emotions come down a little bit. This is one of my top customers. I was getting ready to go on vacation, going in a million directions, but just really, I reminded myself again, don't quickly respond to things. That was one of the things my mentor boss, Laura, taught me. Some of the biggest objections are time and money. So when I'm working with somebody one-on-one, especially on coaching or consulting, if they say I don't have the time or the money, I might say, are you open to some coaching? And if they say yes, I'll say, I get the feeling your heart wants to do this, but your head is talking you out of it. And then they'll typically say, oh yeah, and they might laugh. And then I say, what would it be like if this was the first time or one of the more recent times that you follow your heart and trust yourself and your intuition that this is the right decision for you? So I really handle my objections by asking questions. Can I coach you for a moment? Are you open to an idea? Would you be open to working on that right now in this minute? I try to ask that first. I don't just, sometimes we just dive right into, well, how come you don't have time or money, or just compassionate type questions. The other thing I ask people or companies is, where do you want to be in 1 year from right now? Where will you be 1 year from now if nothing changes? That usually gets people, the pain and the pleasure is always a great place to go. Um, if not now, when? I've had people, and you've got to close your mouth after you ask these questions. That's the hardest part. Count to 7. Don't talk. Just allow that silence, and they will answer that. And then last but not least, when somebody says, I need to ask my spouse, my business partner, my boss, prepare your witness. Well, that's great. I'll just use Jennifer. Jennifer, what will you say to them? And she might say, well, I don't know. Okay. Well, it sounds like based on our conversation today, it's going to help you in this area, that area, and that area. Don't you feel like your boss would want that for you, or whoever that person is? Well, yeah, of course they would. Okay. Do you really think you need to ask them for that permission? Well, and if they still say yes, okay, at least I've helped her know what to say to that person. Because if you're bringing an idea to a board and the person who's sponsoring it at your account doesn't know what they're going to say, and they're going to get in front of a board of directors and they start fumbling and waffling, we don't want that. We want them to be really clear and succinct. So always take that moment and prepare them for that conversation. And it's a great way to weed out people that are just trying to let you down gently. Like, I got to talk to that person. Otherwise, I don't think I'm going to do this, but I don't want to hurt your feelings. And the last tip I want to give you all is, if you do have that agreement with somebody that they got to think about it, well, that's wonderful, Jennifer. How about we talk to each other on Monday afternoon? I can send you a quick invite, and that way we can see where you are with this opportunity. Does that work for you? Don't ever say, okay, great, I'll talk to you soon. Because guess what? In my experience, you will typically, I get busy, they get busy. Always make it a calendar invite. I can't trust my brain anymore. I mean, I don't know what it is, but we all just have so much going on. So those are my objections or questions in disguise. Any questions or comments on that? Yes, Jennifer.
Do you ever offer to be present during those conversations when they need someone else's permission?
Yes, I have offered that before. In a business setting, I'll typically do that. If it's a wife spouse thing, I typically will not. But if it's a business setting of, I need to talk to this person first, I might say, would it make sense for us 3 to meet together and go through that? Yeah, great question.
I do that, but I didn't know if that was too pushy. So I was just curious.
No, I think it's a great question. Absolutely. And you want to get to know fast. If they're just not interested, or not, what I'm saying, we want to know that now. We don't want to have, spend more time. Time is money. We don't want to chase people. So that's why I always make sure to answer that objection, and get it out there. Okay, so this is your opportunity. Would anybody like to share before we wrap this up? Just about at the end, any lessons learned? I've heard some great ones today, but is there anything else? And you can add it in the chat too, if you want to do that.
I think the hardest thing for me to learn in the sales process, and once I got it nailed down, I did so much better, was to shut up.
Oh, yeah.
People have to think, and they are processing all the information you just gave them. And I always wanted to fill this space, and I would talk them out of it, right? Because I wouldn't let them think. And when I learned to shut my little trap and let them think, then I would find out what the objections are, because I wouldn't say, do you have any questions? I always say, we have covered a ton of material. What questions do you have for me right now?
Wow.
Because that gives them permission without making them sound like they didn't understand anything. I'm acknowledging we covered a ton of stuff. I know you're going to have questions, and then I shut up. Because
Love that.
hopefully that brings out the objections, and all objections are buying signals. That's what
right.
I've always been taught. Objections are buying signals, and we're helping them figure out how to get over the objection.
There we go. Thank you. Great insight. Love that.
But as a chatty Susan, I had a really hard time shutting my trap and letting that silence there. It gets uncomfortable.
My sister speaks for me. Yeah, silence is golden. And a lot of sales trainings I've gone through have said that silence is a great negotiation strategy. We've heard that who speaks last loses. I mean, I don't, not to, sound calloused about that, but most often if you can maintain that silence, that person will typically come back and say yes or whatever it might be. But we do need to allow them to think because we're the experts and they're taking all this in for the first time, as you said. Agree 100%. Okay.
Thinking back to like my enterprise days, I think one of my biggest lessons was don't celebrate the sale too soon because then you get disappointed. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. It's not over till it's signed and booked. And we always say that in the companies I worked at. Thank you for that reminder too. Yeah, make sure that all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed, and it's all in place before we celebrate for sure, because anything can change in this crazy world called sales. So, ladies, I'm always looking to get better as a speaker. So I value your feedback. This is a quick survey that I will ask you if you could take a minute to do this. What I'm going to give you in return for that is I'm going to give you an unpublished chapter from my book, From Zero to Sales Hero. And speaking of that, the chapter is actually called Less is Better. And it's also about some proper words to use when following up with someone who's been dodging you. So it's 2 or 3 pages. It's pretty, not super long. And it will go directly to your inbox. So I'll be quiet for a moment and then we will close this out with the final thought. Hey, Jennifer, I didn't know if you were saying something to me or.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was talking with unmuted. I just finished my survey. I thought that was a really cool way to collect data and
Yeah.
get some real feedback about your presentation.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate you all so much for that because I truly believe feedback is a gift. I always like to continue to do what's great. And then things that aren't working, I want to make sure I eliminate those. So I appreciate that. And thank you for taking a minute to do that. And I can send Jennifer a PDF for these slides as well. So if anybody had to jump off, I will make sure that she gets this as well. Okay, so it all comes full circle. I'll build this out quickly. So back to my story, how did it end? I got to make my sales number for FY12. I got on stage again at the national sales meeting and I took a picture of my plaque. But how did I get myself back up from zero to sales hero? I put a picture here of Tony Robbins, because, you know, I think a lot, but so much of my journey has been about surrounding yourself with successful, like-minded, positive people. And I really started leaning into his work when I got in sales, because I needed that coaching and mentoring. And it was actually, he was one of the people that when I saw him on stage, I was like, I really want to teach and train and coach. And I started seeing a different mission for myself. So even though I made it back on this stage at the national sales meeting, made my number, and I think it was like 128%. It was all great, but the biggest thing is, again, finding in the valley, I found a new mission from that valley. So that's where that happened. And it also inspired me to write my book, From Zero to Sales Hero. And in that book, I remember just making a pact with God that, you know, thank you for helping me keep my job and getting myself back on track. I need to give back. So I put in that book 10 elements of what I believe it takes to be a great sales professional in my personal experience. It is on Amazon if you want to take a look at it. Some of you might already have it, but it's also on Kindle as well. So I just wanted to mention that. Okay, and then closing thoughts: confident connection, confidence, and structure. These were really some of the key themes we talked about today that I just wanted to summarize, because I know that it's been a great discussion, a lot of, hopefully for you, great information that you all can apply to your businesses, knowing we're all in, you know, different businesses. I believe these elements are unchanged no matter what business you're in. And as we totally close this out, I want to say thank you again. I can stick around for questions. If any of you want to talk to me privately and had questions about something I said or a particular challenge you're facing in sales, I love, you know, like Debbie said earlier, I love talking. I'm a chatty Cathy. You can schedule a discovery call with me by using that QR code. And if you want to see more about what I do or who I am behind the scenes, my website is also listed here along with my contact information. I think all of us are connected on LinkedIn too, so that's another way you can always get a hold of me if that's best. So Jennifer, thank you for this opportunity. I'll turn it back over to you and see if there's anything you'd like to say before we close it out. And thank you, Denise, for your comments. I'm looking at that in the chat. Thank you so much, everybody. And Karen as well. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you for your time and your expertise. I know the sales coaching that you provided me helped me level up when I was at Enterprise and hit senior business banker and president circle. So I know firsthand, you know what you're doing. So it's very impressive. And I think this is a great reminder of the things that we need to keep doing or do a little bit differently or allow our brains to shift. So thank you so much. And thank you everybody for joining us today. And I will have this available on YouTube, Deb, since you weren't able to get the very beginning of the slides, and I'll send it out by email as well. So thank you all and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. And I'll send the PDF to you as well, Jennifer.
Cool.
All right. Thank you, ladies. Have a great day. Thanks for joining me. Bye.